You wrote in my book a profile in courage. And of course,
Yeah.
that means a lot to me because sometimes you have to stick your neck out in life when you don't want to, and it may not serve your business interests to do so, but it may be the right thing to do. And you talk about Churchill and saving Jews, and obviously I'm a 𝗕𝗺𝗁𝘀𝗵ite, having gone to more bar mitzvahs than christenings as a Roman Catholic, Silva. I'm a 𝗕𝗺𝗁𝘀𝗵ite. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the need to having to speak out. And I have 5 children, and so they're watching. You have to make sure you let them know there are more than just the temporary things that are important. Sometimes the principles are more important than what's temporal. So joining us now is Daniel Silva. He's an award-winning #1 New York Times best-selling author. He's probably the spy novelist of our generation, if not all generations. The new book, which is the 24th novel featuring Gabriel Allon. The title of the book is A Death in Cornwall. I got an advance copy of this book, by the way, so I had the opportunity to read it. My producer was remarking about how fabulous it is. It's different from your other books in some ways. We're going to talk a little bit about that. You've gone in a different direction. There's some spying, but there's a crime thriller, but it's also wrapped in a political drama, and it's very contemporized. I feel like when I get a Daniel Silva book in the summer, I feel like I'm getting a briefing book on the next year of what's going to happen in our society. And so I want to start there for a second. It begins with a death in Cornwall. And of course, we have this familiar face, Timothy Peele, who we know. Set the scene for us from your prior books. And I know you love Cornwall, by the way, and I've been there, and I know why you love it, because it's, I don't know, there's a lot of cross currents that are happening in Cornwall from a civilization perspective. And so I understand why your protagonist is living up there, but explain it to us. Why Cornwall? Who is Timothy Peele? And tell us about some of these great characters of yours.
Okay, why Cornwall? It is the most magically beautiful place that I've ever been in my life, and I go every chance I get. I'm just inspired by the scenery. I love the coastline. I love the people. I just think it's got this Arthurian magic in the air. And I actually wrote the first chapters of the Gabriel Allon series in a rented house in Cornwall, so it'll always hold a very special place for me. And I had to put a little preface in this novel for new readers, just to make sure that everyone understood the connection. But when I created Gabriel, he was living as sort of a grieving recluse. He had just lost his wife and family to a terrorist bombing, his wife and son to a terrorist bombing in Vienna. And he was hiding out there, working as an art restorer under an assumed identity. And this little 11-year-old kid, who happened to be exactly the same age as his dead son, lived next door. And they were both sort of wounded souls in their own way, and they formed a relationship. Fast forward 25 years, that little 11-year-old boy is now a man in his mid-30s, and he is because of Gabriel, undoubtedly, a detective sergeant in the Devon and Cornwall Police Department. A death in Cornwall takes place. The victim is a renowned professor of art history from the University of Oxford. She spends her weekends out in Cornwall. And Timothy asks Gabriel to help him out with the investigation. One thing leads to another, as it often does in a Gabriel Allon novel, and he finds himself in the middle of a big political scandal involving the election of the next British Prime Minister. So you're very astute. It is a fast-paced, entertaining, light in tone summer beach novel. It's part murder mystery, it's part art caper, and it's part political thriller.
Yeah.
And it deals with it explores how art can be used for purposes of money laundering, and frankly, how London has become the money laundering capital of the world.
Yeah, well, listen, we interviewed an author that more or less wrote a book about the London for whatever reason, whether it's Russian money, art laundering, drug laundering. There's a whole laundry mat of a set of services in London now
Can
for the
I can I ask?
roads.
Can I
Yeah,
interrupt you?
yeah.
Who did you interview? Was that Tom
Um,
Burgess?
Holly, interrupt me and help me. What was the name of the?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I'm gonna the book on money laundering in London. Holly, do you remember? Yeah, I'll dig it up. I
Okay,
thought he
okay.
was, I thought he was fascinating,
Well,
um, and I'll find it.
look,
I'll find it on the internet.
look.
But
This is a that Britain's National Crime Agency put out a report recently that it's too big to actually get your arms around, but they estimate that we're talking about several hundred billion
Butler to the
pounds.
world. Not to
Butler,
interrupt you.
oh,
It's
Butler to the
the
world.
gentleman's name was Oliver Belong.
Okay,
I'll
thank you
I'll
so
I'll,
much.
I'll send you the link to the book.
I
But
appreciate that.
he and Holly, if we can find that old podcast, we'll send it to Kip. But he was brilliant in terms of explaining. This is the weird thing about this, Daniel, that is unspoken in the United States. The
Right,
15 million immigrants are generating economic revenues and taxation for the
of course they are.
economy
Of course they are.
and are actually supporting the Social Security
Of course they are.
system. We don't talk about that though if we're American nativists, okay? But the weird thing about money laundering in London, it's actually it's part of the commercial activity of that city now. Is what the point of this man who wrote Butler to the World, which I'll send it to
I
you. But
I agree. I agree. It is. It's the business model.
the business
It,
model, and
yeah.
and you have a country. It's interesting because I was telling you this morning. I've learned a lot in your books over the years, and you write about some of the economic dilemmas that the country's faced with, particularly since Brexit. You also write about the lack of services, 90 minutes to get an ambulance to your house if you're under distress under NHS. And there's a whole host of things that are going wrong. And there's a time and an opportunity for political change, which you write beautifully about. But I want to go to something that's always fascinated me. And I know you know a lot about this. And I want to talk about the
Mm,
thousands of paintings
mm,
that were seized by the Nazis. Some of them ended up in the Louvre. Some of them ended up in these world-class museums.
yeah.
And they were literally stolen and pilfered from uh, German Jews, aristocratic Jews in France, Polish Jews. And where are those paintings today? And how many of them got returned to their rightful owners?
Um, a remarkably large number. If we could just, we'll talk about just what happened in France because that's what this book deals with. But the Germans came rolling into Paris in June 1940, and they started grabbing everything they could get their hands on. The French had managed to hide much of the greatest pieces that were in the Louvre, but um, uh, you know, Jewish collections that were in Jewish hands were seized. Jewish art dealers' collections were seized. Inventories were seized. Um, just small, successful businessmen who happen to be Jewish and happen to have a few pieces of art. They were in danger of losing their art. So we are talking about. I don't want to misstate the number, but hundreds of thousands of objets d'art were seized in France. Much of it, I'm so sorry, that's you. Much of it was carted back to Germany on trains. But there was a thriving art market that was underway in France during the war, and a number of Jewish people who were fleeing were engaged in what we now call coerced sales. They had to part with their art under circumstances, whether they were trying to flee or whether they felt they were about to be deported, and so those pieces are still floating around the art world, where people acquired a work under dubious circumstances during the war, whether being a collector or a dealer, and then profited by selling those later. And that's that little sub angle to the story that I deal with in this book. So there are many thousands. I mean, if you were to look at the art press on a weekly basis, art news or the art newspapers, there's always a story about this painting popping up and this painting. And so if you are a collector and you are looking to buy something that might have changed hands during World War II in France, you better have someone like Charlotte Blake, who's the murder victim in this novel. She's a provenance expert. You better have someone really look at the provenance and make sure you've got an airtight provenance, because there are many pieces that changed hands under dubious circumstances that are still floating around the art world. But look, the good news is that we were able to get much of it back, thanks to the work of the monuments men, and we were able to track it down and get many pieces back to France. But there are still pieces that are in the French museums, state museums, and pieces that seeped into the art world that are still lost today.
It's a truly fascinating thing that's happened. I know more about the art world than I deserve to because of Daniel Silva and Gabriel Allon. So I want to switch gears and talk about free ports. Okay, and so for viewers and listeners that don't know what a free port is, I'll try to explain it, and Daniel can interrupt me if I've got it wrong.
No, I want you to explain it. You explain it.
But there are areas of cities near airports, frankly, where they're treated as tax-free zones. They're almost treated as an international zone for purposes of storing goods. It could be collectibles, it could be wine, art, even automobiles.
Yes.
And why is that done that way? Because you can ship something to Geneva and store it in a free port and not be taxed or tariffed on an incoming product or good or service coming into the country. And so there are free ports in Geneva, there are free ports in Singapore and other parts of the world where billions upon billions of dollars of art are stored in these free ports. Moreover, the very famous Salvador Mundi ended up in one of these free ports while it was transitioning before it was sold to Christie's. And so the free port concept comes up in this book. So tell us a little bit about the Geneva free port, Mr. Silva, and what the solution to the wider issue is that Gabriel discovers, and try to do it delicately, sir, if you don't mind.
Delicately.
I don't want to ruin the book for people.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to talk about it conceptually. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me start to take a different tack into it. Let us say that our government, European governments, have awakened to the fact that fine art, especially very, very costly fine art, is a perfect way to launder money. Why is that? It's incredibly valuable. It's incredibly portable. It is subjective in values. I mean, it's worth whatever someone is willing to pay you for it, or whatever you're willing to pay for it. And increasingly, this is something we learned from the Panama Papers scandal, because when those documents came out, we were able to determine that a number of incredibly important dealers and collectors owned their paintings using anonymous shell companies created by Mossack Fonseca. And it doesn't take someone like me to see that the Freeport system and anonymous sales using shell companies where the money is flowing through offshore tax havens, oblivious to government. So the size of the art trade is $70 or $80 billion a year. Almost all of those sales are completely private. In most cases, the seller doesn't know the buyer doesn't know the seller. The government knows nothing at all. Governments know nothing at all. There's no regulation to speak of. And it's shell company to shell company, money moving out there in the ether someplace, and no taxation, no capital gains. It is a perfect way to launder money. And so the Freeport system, and I know my friends in the art world will probably take issue with this, but you can buy a painting. I'm around the corner from your office. You can buy your $100 million painting at Christie's, ship it to the Freeport in Geneva, and you're not going to pay any taxes on that. I mean, I can't go to Dwayne Reed and buy shaving cream without paying taxes.
No, it's a fascinating loophole.
I mean, you know how much you save in the state of New York doesn't receive when you ship your painting to a Freeport. I mean, it's
but this is a way that the rich avoid taxes, right? Because let's say I've come into a windfall.
Yep.
I buy the piece of art. I know that the art's going to appreciate due to the scarcity value of the art.
Yep.
I wait 15 years and I've got this tax-free accumulation of wealth.
Well, there's another way that you could do it, though. So you can if you're nefarious, and this is, I use this scheme in the novel. I actually, when I finished the book, I stumbled on a sort of a professional document that was prepared by an AML firm, and you deal with these people about the red flags that you need to look for if you're in the art business. But say you ship your painting to the Freeport, and so now it's there. It's hidden in a vault. The vault is rented by an offshore company, so you don't even know who the actual beneficial owner is of the company. You can sell your painting within the Freeport, and you could sell it for a profit and pay no capital gains on that transaction. It just moves from vault to vault. And so I created a scheme in this novel by which you're using the Freeport system and the opacity of the art world to launder and conceal billions and billions and billions of dollars belonging to some of the worst people in the world. The scheme I used is quite real, actually.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is why I love your books, is I'm always learning something in your books, and you are such a refined gentleman. It is nice to see that there's an aspect of your brain that can get to the nefarious nature of these SOBs that are out there. But I want to go to something that was said earlier today. We had the chance to see each other at Morning Joe this morning. Somebody said that the Tories, the Conservative Party in Britain, is one of the longest or the oldest parties that's still in existence. And for
I believe I said that. I said that on the article.
Okay. And I think you then also said that for 2/3 of the history of the country, it's run the country.
2/3 of the Tories' history. It has been in power for 2/3 of its existence, and I was citing those figures to sort of illustrate how dramatic the collapse of this party that we just witnessed really is. As I said on Morning Joe, this is not some fringe party. This is the Conservative Party of Winston Churchill and Margaret Thatcher. And to see it devolve into this clown show over the last few years has been, whatever your politics are, it was just not a good sign for the health of our democracy. What was a good sign for the health of our democracy was that the British people, in their infinite wisdom, said, time out, Tories. You're gonna have a think for a couple of election cycles and see if you can get your act together. They were routed. They deserve to be routed, and hopefully, and I mean this, hopefully, they can go into the wilderness for a while and find their way back to the center and become the professional governing party that we've known them to be. So, I want to say one more thing, if it's okay.
Please.
We were talking about the London laundromat. Okay. One of the things that the London laundromat did is it welcomed with open arms hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Russian money. It just poured into the London's financial system, poured into real estate, all through the economy. It's sloshing around. And in 2021, the British committee of the British Parliament released what is now known as the Russia Report. And this is a stunning document that said that all that money that Vladimir Putin, the Kremlin, Russian intelligence services deliberately set out to corrupt the British financial sector, corrupt British institutions, and corrupt British politics using money as a weapon. There have just been scandal after scandal after scandal involving the Tories and money. And I don't want to get too conspiratorial here, but the Tories were the Cold War party. They were always very Russia hawks, and now they are in ruins, at least for the time being. And I wonder how Vladimir Putin feels about that, because I think that was a goal of the Kremlin, is to weaken that party.
So, I mean, it's a really good segue for my next question, because I want to tie it back to American politics. So we do know that, when we read things like Putin's People from Catherine Belton, we do know that the Russians are trying to influence Western democracies. They're trying to unsettle them. They're trying to convince the people in these democracies that their democracies are not legitimate. And then they have these useful idiots that will chant that, pretend that there's election fraud, pretend that there's election lies, and so forth. So I'm wondering, though, if this backfires on Putin, meaning he destroyed that party, or he helped to destroy that party. It's not in their best interest. They have to now recalibrate. Something very similar, frankly, is going on in the American right, where they have these acolytes of Trump and Putin, and this chant of Putin talking points. Do you think something similar could happen here in the United States?
I don't know. I have to say that, to see, just today we wake up and we open our newspaper and we see that the Russians have, lobbed missiles into a children's hospital in Ukraine. And to think that if former President Trump gets back in the White House, that we could, pull the rug out from under the Ukrainians right away and let Putin have his way in Ukraine. It's too awful to contemplate, but that seems to be where we're headed. I'm stammering a little bit because I don't know what the future holds here in this country, in terms of
it's just interesting. It's almost feel like it's these countries are so elastic that even the damage could create a reversionary effect, where there could be also a renewal as a result of the damage. Well, we'll have to see. I want to end it with a few last questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Gabriel Allon has changed over the years. Mm-hmm. Rugged, tough, assassin, art restorer. He's a different guy now, though, right? He's a different guy.
Different guy.
How has he evolved in your mind, and where is Gabriel Allon going?
I would describe it thusly, that for the bulk of the series, he was an intelligence officer and sometimes an assassin whose cover job was that he was an art restorer. And so he lived in Europe under an assumed identity and worked as an art restorer and used that cover job to do his secret work. Now he is an art restorer who used to be an intelligence officer. So he still has all the old contacts. He can still move in and out of that world. But it does give me a lot more freedom in terms of the kind of material that I can send his way. It does allow me to. He lives in Venice. He and his wife own a restoration company in Venice. He lives in this gorgeous palazzo overlooking the Grand Canal. He's got two young kids that go to school at a scuola primaria around the corner from their house. He hangs out in the Campo de Frari all day at a coffee shop there. That's their neighborhood. He's got a great life. And so I softened it deliberately for this final stretch of the series.
It's fascinating.
To give him a nice life.
It's easy to fall in love with this guy, and I am obviously in love with him. All right, I come down to my 5 famous words.
Okay.
Our podcast ends every time my producer and I, we pick 5 things to get our authors to react to. So I'm going to say the word, and then whatever comes into your mind, you'll say. Okay. So, let's go back to the word Cornwall. I say the word Cornwall. You think what? I
think. You want me to, one word association, or do I get it?
Yeah.
Okay. I think about the most pure light. This is very special light that's there. The most gorgeous coastline, rocky coastline. The water is extraordinary. The coastline has changed over the centuries, and so there are submerged cities out there. Probably, I just think it's absolutely magical. It's King Arthur. It's magical.
Yeah. Okay. I think of Cornwall. I think of you, actually, when I think of Cornwall. British politics. I say the words British politics. You think what?
I am, as you might imagine, from reading this book, I am addicted to British politics. I have a great deal of admiration for the British system and what they accomplished in World War II. They saved us. They saved members of our family. They would not be alive. I just rewatched Darkest Hour for the 10th time the other night on Netflix. And I think about what the British people did, Gary Oldman as Winston, what Winston did. And I looked at my wife, I said, there wouldn't be a single Jewish person alive left in Europe if it wasn't for Winston Churchill standing up to that guy. I have tremendous admiration for the British people. And I'm influenced by British literature, but I love British politics. I love Number 10. And John Major is one of my biggest fans.
Well, I mean, I'm with you on all of that. American politics.
Nervous. I had hopes after the midterm election that maybe the fever had broken, and that was a term that you had used in one of our many conversations. That maybe the fever had broken, and I don't think that anymore. And I see that we could be on the. I have memorized Robert Kagan's 3 or 4 pieces that he has written for the Washington Post. They're at the dark end of the spectrum. And I think it's possible, and I think that we could be heading into a period of great political and civil uncertainty. I'll use that word in the United States.
All right. Well, I'm hopeful. I think that there's a weirdness going on now, but I'm hopeful. All right. My last 2 phrases or words. Ready? I say Gabriel Allon. You say who? You say what?
I think of a guy who is so gifted, so talented, but ultimately so decent. Okay, he's done hard things. He's killed a lot of people in his lifetime, but at his core, he is a decent person, and he has a really sometimes too strong, but a very strong sense of right and wrong. He defends those who can't defend themselves. He is a kind person. He's very, very funny. I love every minute that I get to spend with him.
All right. What about the man Daniel Silva?
Friend of Anthony Scaramucci. How about that?
Well, that's something I'm very proud of, by the way. And you always give me a beautiful inscription, by the way, which is quite flattering.
Let's show it. No, read it. Let's see it. Because I mean it. Because I think that I wish there were more. Just a handful more.
You wrote in my book, and I'm probably people are now thinking I'm looking for a compliment. But you wrote in my book a profile in courage, and of course that means a lot to me because sometimes you have to stick your neck out in life when you don't want to, and it may not serve your business interests to do so. But it may be the right thing to do, and you talk about Churchill and saving Jews, and obviously I'm a 𝗲𝗺𝗪-Semite, having gone to more bar mitzvahs than christenings as a Roman Catholic, Silva. I'm a 𝗲𝗺𝗪-Semite. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the need to having to speak out. And I have 5 children, and so they're watching. You have to make sure you let them know there are more than just the temporary things that are important. Sometimes the principles are more important than what's temporal. But the title of the book is A Death in Cornwall. It's written by an amazing man, Daniel Silva. He's a best-selling author, and I love this part of the summer. I also feel a little bit bad about this book, as always, because when I get this book in my hand, this is the 24th for me, I know it's peak summer. I know it's going downhill from here, Silva. I know I got to go back to September shortly, but I love this part of the summer, and thank you for sharing these amazing stories with us.
Thank
Very
you
grateful to have you on.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's my favorite part of the summer. I love these conversations. I love the ground that we cover. I like that you come at it from a different angle, and I really, really enjoy this time we have together. So thank you so much.
Well, same here.